Hello everyone, Nick Ranks for Kids here once again, bringing you more of something different. About a month ago, I asked my subscribers in a community post what characters they might like to see my interpretation of if they played in Go format today. It would be a bit too obvious to just pick an existing deck and say they would play that. So of course I took into consideration the character style, themes, and cards played in the series. This week, we have my interpretation of Yugi's Go format deck. But if you have a character you would like to see next, feel free to comment below, even if they're not from Yu-Gi-Oh! And of course, feel free to let me know your interpretation of this deck. All out of the way, let's get started on the deck profile. For Yugi, it was a relatively simple choice. Not only is Yugi a top tier duelist, so he'd play a top tier deck, but his entire character theme related to light and darkness, chaos. Chaos Turbo was an obvious pick for the shell of the deck, but of course, it had to have Yugi's signature monster Dark Magician. I'd also recalled a recent Chaos Turbo deck that topped with Dark Magician of Chaos, so I sort of used that as a shell to begin building the deck. As you can see, at first glance this deck looks very similar to a Chaos Turbo deck, but it is running the Dark Magician of Chaos as well as the skilled Dark Magicians and Dark Magician himself. Strangely enough though, there are actually more cards than that Yugi played in his deck. Now of course, we know that he used the Ritual monster BLS in the anime, but technically speaking in GX he did also have Endway of the Beginning as the deck of his that was stolen by the Mimic Duelist had BLS Envoy, as well as Dark Magician of Chaos, which was not in the original Yugi's deck in Duel Monsters. But, obviously, not only are they retrains of his monsters, but technically he had them in the universe of Yu-Gi-Oh! Then, of course, we all remember Breaker the Magical Warrior's grand moment in the Berserker Soul scene. The Magician of Faith was also used by Yugi and Sangan, plus the 3 skilled Dark Magicians here to summon his ace monster Dark Magician. Because he was such a prolific and strong duelist, he also used staple cards such as Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, and Heavy Storm. He technically used Premature Burial, but it was only seen in a scene where he was looking through cards that he owned, and besides that very slight connective tissue there, I also thought it fit because you'd be able to bring back your Demok, your Dark Magician, and your skilled Dark Magicians, and be able to get a counter on your skilled Dark Magician to be able to summon your Dark Magician faster. Not when you summon it by Premature Burial, but you know what I mean. And then of course he used Mystical Space Typhoon, and Brain Control was also a card that he used, and I think it's very fitting for this deck because not only is it just a decent card to have generally, but lets you get a counter onto your skilled Dark Magician, lets you get another monster down in the field to tribute for Dark Magician of Chaos or Dark Magician, and sometimes you can just use it to steal games. He also used Card Destruction, which is also a common card used in Chaos decks. And of course he used Swords of Revealing Light. Not only does this help us to accrue monsters so that we can hopefully get our big monsters out, but also puts a counter on our skilled Dark Magician. Of course, we know Yugi used Mirror Force, and if you want to be very technical, his grandpa used Sinister Serpent. But also in the side deck we have here a copy of Kuribo for against those OTK decks, and Emergency Provisions for against Burn or when he's in time, because he used those as well in the series. And Dust Tornadoes is another good card that he used, useful for getting rid of your opponent's pesky spell and traps when they're a trap heavy deck or if they play a lot of floodgates. And instead of Trap Dust Shoot, Yugi would be playing Life Force Sword, which he will always randomly banish the one card the opponent needs from their hand so that they end up losing the duel. Why rely on something like Trap Dust Shoot, which can only take monsters, when you can use Life Force Sword to just choose whatever the heck you want because you know you're going to be lucky enough to banish the card randomly. Some cards that weren't used in this deck they could use in the side deck here are Tribute to the Doomed. You could play like 1 or 2. It's just a way to get like counters onto Skill Dark Magician and get your Dark Magician of Chaos and Dark Magician in the Grave to bring back. Mystic Walk, of course, everyone's got to play Mystic Walk. You never know when you're going to face burn. Something you could play in this deck too is Giant Trunade. I couldn't really find room. I didn't want to get rid of Mystical Space Typhoon because it is a Yugi card, but you could replace it there. It lets you reuse your Swords Revealing Light, and lets you reuse your Premature Burial, and of course you're getting a counter on Skilled Dark Magician. Yugi also did not play Call the Haunted, but again, bring back your big boss monsters with it. Bring back Skilled Dark Magician to beat down. He did use Magic Cylinder though, which is a decent card to put in against Solemn decks. And some other considerations are Torrential Tribute. I did not main deck it, because if you stick one of these bosses, you don't want to have to get rid of them. You'd rather destroy them with something like Raigeki Break. Destroy an opponent's monsters with Raigeki Break, I mean. And I got rid of Tsukiyomi from the main because we don't really have many flips anymore, but it could still be useful for against warriors. And of course, for the fusion deck, he's always going to be playing his cards from the anime, including Black Skull Dragon and Dark Flare Knight and Dark Paladin. Even though he can't technically summon it, you never know. Maybe the opponent uses Exchange twice and you get a Buster Blader and a Polymerization. That is about it. This is what the deck looks like in its full once again. Let me know what you guys think, but before that, I'm going to show you one duel. Again, this deck is not designed to be fully competitive, but it's meant to be semi-competitive, meaning it could technically win against a good deck, but it's also going to trounce pretty much every casual deck. And unfortunately, I went up against a more casual deck, but thank you very much to my opponent who I faced. They used a very cool deck, and I hate playing decks like this that are, you know, kind of just like basically Chaos Turbo, but it's completely fitting for the theme, unfortunately. And after that, let me know what you guys think, and I hope you have a good one.